Hi, I'm Annabel.
And I'm Mandy.
And welcome to the Collaborate Southwest podcast.
We believe in the ethos of a rising tide lifts all boats. For each episode, we'll be bringing you conversations and insights from the people behind the brightest ideas and innovations from across the Southwest, whatever business or sector that may be.
As well as a few curveballs to make you smile and lift your day.
Join us over the coming weeks.
And please, if you like us, do leave us a 5-star review to let us know we're going in the right direction. Enjoy! Well, we are delighted to welcome Andrew Hardwick, Managing Director of Exeter City Futures, to the Collaborate Southwest podcast series. Welcome, Andrew.
Hi, Andrew.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, you're very welcome. We're going to be asking you a few questions around your goals as Exeter City Future MD and the future of Exeter, and obviously around collaboration. But firstly, would you just give us an insight into your role and what Exeter City Futures is achieving currently?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm, as you described, the Managing Director at Exeter City Futures. I've been in situ for almost 5 months. Time has flown by, and in essence, Exeter City Futures are a community interest company, and we work on behalf of the city to basically try and realise its net zero aspirations by 2030. And we've got a clear plan, the net zero 2030 plan for Exeter, that is the sort of main framework of how we intend to do that. And our work is very, very complex and, very mixed. It involves lots of collaboration. So, good to get that one in the context of yourselves. But basically it involves us working with individuals, as in, citizens and residents, communities, businesses and organisations, and sort of city leadership and politicians around how do you work with all of those stakeholder groups to ultimately make this big change and, ultimately deliver net zero outcomes and cleaner air and better green space and biodiversity, that sort of thing. So really fascinating, really challenging, and really exciting about what lays ahead of us, really.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for sharing with that. And we look forward to delving into it in a bit more detail currently. So if we can, first question is, we're talking to business leaders from across the region as part of this podcast series. What are the important elements for you to be a good leader, and how do you continue to develop and grow, particularly at the moment in these really challenging times?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the truth is there's loads of different elements. I could probably list 20 or 30 things that are, key strengths of, leaders or different leaders. And we have, talking personally, what are the ones that really spring to the top of my list that I would say important? I think being humble is one of them, in terms of, being aware and admitting your own mistakes and your own weaknesses, and realizing how important other people are, within that. Being able to show gratitude for your team and other people who can help you and, help you to, be successful or achieve the outcomes. I think it also generally makes you much more empathetic to your team and the people that you interact with. And ultimately that sort of gratitude, it's important that they know that, really. I also think integrity or authenticity, again, really, really key in terms of, doing what's right. It's something that's easily said, but sometimes it can be really hard, but, staying true to that and doing that consistently and with everyone. And that ultimately brings confidence to be able to talk about why you're doing it. It builds trust, it builds transparency, and being comfortable about your actions and your actions of your organisation, I think, is really important. Probably more so than ever before, I'd say emotional intelligence as well. Again, in terms of really understanding your team and the people you work with or the people you interact with. Life is more complex than it's ever been before, and it was anyway. And I guess, COVID and the pandemic has only exacerbated that. And I think having that awareness and the sort of calmness and the clarity that it can bring to your decision making can be really good. And, it helps you manage the peaks and troughs. When things are going really well, you don't get too carried away. When things are really tough, you don't lose hope. It sort of brings that optimism and self-awareness of your own resilience. And then I guess finally, probably, leaders I think need to be brave or courageous. I think going back to some of the complexities I just talked about, and it's hard when you're trying to balance that and manage that, and all of the conflicting interests and conflicting challenges and lots of short-term pressures. It's being brave enough to know that you're on the right path and stay true to that, and not always think in the short term. It's about actually sometimes short-term tactics are needed, but beyond that, it's what's actually most beneficial for me or my team or the organization in the medium and long term as well. So I guess they would be the ones that stand out for me personally.
Yeah.
I find it fascinating, Andrew. You mentioned a huge long list there, and you would think like brave and courageous are hugely important qualities, authenticity and integrity. But right at the top of your list, the number one thing that you mentioned was being humble. How would you describe that in terms, leaders are meant to be the one in charge and gung-ho and follow me. Describe how humbleness really fits at the top of the list for you.
You're right, and I think the traditional view of a leader, certainly, historically, would be that the real big dominant character, and I think dominance can come in different ways, and authority can come in different ways, and there's different tactics that can work. And I'm not saying one's right or wrong, but I think likewise, I think it's very easy to fall in the trap of thinking it's all about me and everyone else should serve me, and they should serve my goals and my interests and what my outcome should be. And I think it's really important never to lose sight of that, because ultimately the collective is far more important than any given individual. And I think that should apply to the leader as well as anyone else in the team. And I think people actually, in terms of emotional loyalty and their buy-in and feeling inspired, buy into that just as much as someone who might be more archetypical, sort of, or stereotypically dominant and shouty and, very top down, you must do it this way and I'm going to stand over your shoulder and breathe down your neck. I think leadership's evolved, and whilst there's probably a time and a place for that, I think there are other ways that are just as effective. And I think that humbleness of knowing where we were, where we are, where we're heading, the roles that other people play in that, and also been, honest enough to say, these are my strengths and this is what I bring to the table. These are your strengths and this is what you bring to the table. And actually us both doing that is going to be far more powerful and far more effective than me just deciding everything all of the time.
It all comes back to something else that you mentioned. It all sort of links very nicely into self-awareness, doesn't it? Because if you're self-aware, then that humbleness will come. If you're aware of your strengths and what you bring to the party, I think it's an all-round package, isn't it? And I think, like you say, the days of shouty managers and leaders, I hope, are long behind us. And long may your the way that that you think leadership should be. I think that's the way forward.
I think also, I said again, it sort of probably links to the other point around, complexity of the sort of environment is more complex than ever before, for lots of reasons, technological advances and, the list could go on and on. We could talk that in itself could be a podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think there was sort of more traditionally this view that, the leader or the person at the top would have all of the answers, would know it all, would know everything. And whilst that's still important, it absolutely is. It's not to say it isn't. I think the complexity of most organizations and sort of the world we operate in means that being an expert on absolutely everything is probably highly unlikely. And
yeah.
Be in a situation where you pretend you are and people might know that you're not, or you can actually articulate that, look, this is where I really need you and this is your expertise and this is what I can really help with. And again, I think that sort of collaborative effort will generally, in most situations, outperform.
Yeah. Agreed. Absolutely. So you're working with Exeter City Council to deliver the Livable Exeter Garden City project, which is a really bold vision of 12,000 new homes being built across the city to include green spaces. And that will be over the next 20 years, starting this year. So is this project built around the idea of 15-minute cities where people work and socialise within 15 minutes of their homes?
Yeah, kind of, but not explicitly. So it does share many, if not all, of the features of sort of a 15-minute city concept like you describe. But it's actually sort of at its fundamentals around building places rather than just units or just buildings.
Right.
So sort of true placemaking, and within that placemaking, it's about looking to create that in a very sustainable, inclusive way that ultimately creates healthy communities for the future. And, you know, linking what's already great about Exeter, because there's loads of things about the city of Exeter that are, you know, absolutely amazing, but also with the forward view of how does that strengthen the city further by adding, you know, new features and new benefits, so that, you know, Exeter is actually leading the way with that, and it isn't just mimicking what another city does, it's actually doing its own plan that sort of reflects the confidence in the city and knowing its own identity, that sort of thing, really. And as such, what that flows through is it's the sites that are being developed to the sort of 15-minute concept that you talk about. Will have lots of those elements. So it will be about, you know, having these really good separate individual communities in each of the 8 sites, you know, done through really high grade sustainable homes. And within those complexes, you'll have a mixture of uses. So, you know, it will be a mixed use offer. So you'll have office space, cafes, doctor surgeries, dentists, shops, you know, potentially hotels. I think one's scheduled to have a rail station incorporated within it. So yeah, in terms of the principles, they sit very much around that in terms of you should be able to live and operate in a way where you're not, you know, reliant on a car. You can walk and get the doctors or get your...
Yeah,
you know.
so it's community building, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it is. It is around true sort of quality placemaking, but sort of aligned to sustainable development as well.
Okay.
So, and within that, in terms of our role, is it fits nicely with the net zero, because obviously it's about reducing the dominance of cars, providing great green spaces, using sustainable energy, passive house building standards, which are obviously, you know, ultra energy efficient. And creating a comprehensive network of active travel networks, and, you know, it will create jobs and improve skills as well. So it sort of ticks many of the sort of elements that sit on the net zero plan for us. Yeah, so it's good. But the reason I say it incorporates it and isn't explicitly, where it sort of goes beyond that, is it in its plan, it actually goes back to the Garden Community Initiative, which is actually over 100 years old. It was founded by a gentleman called Ebenezer Howard more than a century ago. And interestingly, the principles that he established in these sort of garden city networks is relevant today, and, you know, fits with our plan that takes us forward. So it does show you that, you know, there's many things you can learn from the past.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that sounds incredible. Project to sort of kick off. Has it started? I know it was due to start this year, but has COVID affected it?
No, thankfully not. I mean, as it stands, Livable Exeter hasn't really incurred any pandemic delays. There's been disruption within our workings in the team, naturally, because
Yeah,
you know,
of course, yeah.
there's nothing I don't think the pandemic has disruptive. But in terms of delays, no, the good news is project is very much live and on target, and yeah, is going ahead as planned, really, which is really good news and really important for the city.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think these sort of projects, do you think it's fast forwarded the demise of the traditional high street, and is that part of the thinking behind this as well, is to try and transform lives away from that traditional sort of high street mentality?
Yeah, I wouldn't say they're linked directly, but I think the relevance has become probably more obvious. So, Yeah, in terms of the demise of the high street, Livable Exeter isn't a response to that. The plan was already there, and like I said, it
Right.
really is sort of quality placemaking, and this vibrancy and the future of the city of Exeter really was the sort of driving motive for it. I think what's undeniable is the pandemic and the lockdowns have really changed things, and I don't think they're necessarily the root cause of any of the problems, but what they have done is they've exacerbated the problems, and sort of perhaps an 18-month, 2-year problem, but it was already there, is suddenly a 6-month problem, because it's definitely, expedited that certainly around the high streets. And what we've seen is more neighbourhood shopping as people are working more at home. And so I guess it fits within that, but it isn't a response to it.
It's not a response, right. Okay. So as you've outlined, Exeter City Future's goal is to make Exeter carbon neutral by 2030. In your own words, this ambition will require collaborative action from everyone across the city. When you've approached various bodies, which again you've alluded to, that you want to work with to achieve this, how have you been received? Has collaboration been welcomed, or did you find resistance to it?
It's a great question again, and I mean, thankfully, it's got a positive answer.
Oh, good.
So, in terms of how have we been received, I've got to say both sort of the role in the city of the ECF over the last sort of 4.5, 5 years, and then certainly in my time in the last 5 months, both really, really positive in terms of how we've been received, how we've been responded to. So yeah, great energy across the city, and that's across all of the stakeholder groups. Like I alluded to earlier, we work with residents and citizens, communities, businesses, organisations, and the city leadership and the politicians. And there is genuine appetite, enthusiasm to seriously pursue the net zero aspirations and the net zero plan. So that's really, really encouraging. And even this year alone, if you look at, with all of the challenges of COVID, all of the things that could make it less likely or put it on a back burner, if anything, have probably made it more relevant, would be my experience since joining. So the net zero plan, which was released earlier in the year around April, and is the sort of clear roadmap to how we can do this, has had really, really positive response from everyone who's interacted with it. It's been formally adopted by the city, it's been formally adopted by Exeter City Council. It's featured really prominently across the city in terms of recovery plans. So the various organisations who are having to adapt their operations because of COVID and their sort of traditional ops models of how they did things, as they're doing that, it's created huge sort of interest in people coming to us to say, look, while we're doing this, how do we do it, taking the bigger picture view to make sure it's sort of based on the net zero principles as well, which is really, really encouraging. And for us, it's what we need. That level of collaboration is how we will achieve it. Exeter City Futures is doing great stuff and having, a big impact. But the reality is we are just one organisation. There are no silver bullets to solving this problem. There's probably a million different ways we could try to solve it. So it really does take everyone at all levels to play their part and to contribute and to share ideas. So it's key to us. That sort of collaborative spirit is really important, and is one of the real big foundations of what we stand for. Thankfully, that's alive in the city, which is brilliant.
So great to hear that. Yeah, like you say, very encouraging. Mandy, sorry, you got a question.
I think I just want to pick up on that point. I think it is really heartwarming and encouraging to hear that collaboration is received so enthusiastically across public sectors. I think from the outside looking in, it's a little bit smirk worthy, if I can invent a word. You don't always think that public sector collaborate happily side by side, whereas you're painting a totally different picture, which is great.
Yeah, and like I said, there's lots to work to do on that. We've got a huge amount to do, and it's hugely ambitious. But yeah, like I said, absolutely central to that is a real shared understanding and need of that's how we need to be and how we need to work. And and it takes everyone to really embrace that. So there's a good foundation in place, put it that way.
So what are the principles of collaboration for you? Do you feel it's advantageous to work with like-minded people, or do you need people with different perspectives to make true collaboration work?
Personally, for me, I think collaboration has to be completely open-ended. So I think you would want to work with both. I don't think there's a downside or a threat to working with like-minded people. That said, I think if you only did that, my personal view would be that you almost end up with the same sort of siloed thinking, same siloed outcomes, and you might get an awful lot of unbalanced decisions because someone who's like me is going to tell me my thought process and decision-making process is probably correct or, bang on. So for me, it does take a much more truly diverse group. And I think that the more diverse, the better, really, because I think often, I know, sort of talking personally about it, I know that the people who are least like me and think completely differently to me generally help me the most in terms of when we start bouncing ideas around or, bouncing challenges and about, God, how do we do this? And what does it take? And what are the options here? I get the most benefit from that real true mix because I can generate my own stuff and I'll do that anyway. But someone who's very different and thinks very differently will give me things I've never even thought of to then start trying to sort of delve into. So, yeah, I think
that's when it gets exciting as well, when you have a completely different perspective thrown at you. It's like, wow, obviously never thought of that. And then the discussions that come from that are where the exciting magic bit happens, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Completely agree.
And that's maybe where collaboration needs a more adult mindset, if you will, than the traditional top-down dissemination, because yes, it's exciting to be given a different perspective, but it's also quite challenging to be effectively your ideas thrown into the mix and blown apart to be re-put together in a totally different way. So adultness is a really key aspect, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think, to help, particularly initially as well, whilst you're forming those collaboration sort of partnerships or networks, whatever you want to call them, really, I think it's almost good in your own mind and perhaps almost have some of those sort of guide rails or sort of things so that people are clear on it in terms of, how are we going to utilize our collective experience? What is the sort of shared outcome or goal we're looking for? Making sure that environment feels safe and it's based on sort of mutual trust and respect and cooperation. Again, on a personal level, if you're going into that, probably being clear about actually what capability or experience or expertise am I bringing to the table, or is my organisation bringing to the table? Because you then know your part in that network, and that's how you can start actually then getting in a constructive way, which what ultimately collaboration should lead to, is to actually some really good, tangible problem solving or use of innovation or, improved communication or a bigger network, better efficiency, or the list can go on what the benefits are. But I think it's good to have some of those sort of clear things of, this is why we're here and why we're together. This is what we're looking to achieve, or this is the gap we're looking to sort of bridge. But yeah, I think it's an incredible strength, collaboration, when done well.
So would you have any tips for business leaders who maybe aren't collaborating at the moment, and how to get started and the pitfalls to avoid?
Yeah, I mean, some of the things probably just said explain some of that, I guess. My personal starting point would be, how good is an organisation of collaborating internally first? Because that's a good place to start and say, actually, are we in-house doing it at all? Are we doing it effectively? Could we get better? And invariably, everyone could always get better, because that's true of everything. And then, take some of those principles, what you're doing internally are good to sort of work out, how that could work externally into a bigger audience, or to, to a more mixed, network beyond your own organization. And I think it's then looking for what's your reasons for looking to collaborate? What is the sort of goal or the outcome you're looking to achieve? Are you clear on that yourself? Because actually, if you approach a collaboration not really clear on that, you're already probably starting from a weak position about how are you going to reach an outcome if you don't know what you're looking at outcome to be.
Yeah.
And I also think you need to be really open-minded. I think if you're entering that, you need to sort of keep that ability to stay agile and see the strengths of others and what different people can bring to the table. And, you might end up with a very different outcome to what you initially would have foresaw it being. I think being open-minded about that is probably really important too, because some of the solutions aren't the ones that you would have naturally have gone to yourself. And they shouldn't be, because that's the whole point of the collaboration process.
Yeah, no, that's a really good tip about open-minded and transparency, I think, like you're saying, being clear about what you're wanting to achieve. And it might change, but if you have some parameters to begin with, then it will help the process, won't it?
Our net zero plan that we released, I referred to it a little while ago, that was released earlier in the year, is probably a great real life example of that. And it was actually conducted before I joined. So this is something that eChef did, prior to me being in role. But everything I've seen, heard and talked about, and, lots of people who are involved in that have spoken to me about this as well. But it does show you how something that's really, really complex, working out how a city could become net zero in under 10 years is very
ambitious. And
highly ambitious. And yet what Exeter City Futures did is, and it's not just them, I guess the point I'm making is that document was formed by true collaboration. I don't know the exact numbers, but I know it was over 50 different organisations were directly involved in contributing to it being built, through the sort of work we did with communities, through engagement and residents. Hundreds of different individuals, different people contributed to ideas, what they wanted it to be, how it should be laid out. And that's, people and organisations not only just having a talk, that involved them actually contributing time, expertise, data. And what was created at the end was this, I think it's 77 pages long, really great comprehensive document, but shows you that even in something so complex with so many different people, that with those right rules, what can be achieved. So I guess that's a living example of how it can work when done well.
Brilliant, thank you. And how crucial do you think it is now for businesses to collaborate moving forward?
I mean, crucial would be my personal view. I think, and again, probably alluded to lots of this before, but given the complexity of the world we operate in, more so than ever before with COVID, as a very real example now, and most of this year, and God knows how long into next. I think what's become clear for many people and many organisations is that most significant problems are interlinked, and the environment's another great example of that. And the recovery from the first lockdown is another example of that. And I think it's shown, certainly my involvement with some of the recovery strands of work across the city and how we've been involved in that and worked, what it's shown is to people and organisations that I think lots of people are asking themselves or challenging themselves with the same issues simultaneously. And I think that's really shown the need that actually you could have 10 different organisations spending time, money, resource on solving a problem, and you could then have 10 different outcomes, or you could have all of them in a joined up way, in a coordinated way, doing that together, and you'll probably get a far better outcome, far quicker, in a far more efficient manner. So I think it's absolutely essential for the future, and even beyond the pandemic. I don't think that's a pandemic thing.
I agree. I think it's bigger than that, isn't it? Mandy, you were going to ask something.
I was just going to say, I think it's really pertinent that what you said was most significant problems are interlinked. And that links back to what you said a little bit earlier on again, which is COVID isn't the root cause of the problem. It's just really shone a spotlight on the cracks that were already there. And I know that I think that, and I'm sure a lot of people listening will kind of nod and resonate, but it's what we do with this whole structure, because it's not isolated incidents, it's interlinked, as you say.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And particularly with the sort of environmental element in terms of what do we do with a climate crisis and how do we become more sustainable. What I've learned, rapidly, and has been reinforced on pretty much every interaction I've had in this role, is that when you strip it back, it does keep coming back to those main sort of pillars of themes that are constantly there. So, yeah, I absolutely think the only way forward is to acknowledge that and really embrace that it takes a collaborative effort on most of those things to actually get a meaningful solution that actually has a benefit to everyone ultimately.
Thank you. We moving away slightly off that theme, but it's about learning and growing. We've just started a book club in our group, and it's been really popular. Lots of different business books have been put in the channel there for people to read and have been recommended. What have you got any business books that you've really learnt from that you could share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I try to read a lot as around this sort of area in terms of leadership, and it's not just books. That I look at TED Talks, and
sure.
LinkedIn's very good for it. There's lots of different sort of papers on there from different universities, etc., and special forces, Navy SEALs, all sorts. There's lots of stuff out there. In terms of books, I guess the one that springs to mind and probably best reinforces some of my earlier answers around what I think is important to leadership is it's a book called 11 Rings, and it's written by Phil Jackson. So just to context that, so Phil Jackson is the most successful NBA coach of all time. He's won 11 NBA championships in the US. Wow. And sort of operated in this really highly competitive elite sports world, media governed, on the news all of the time, interviews, a really pressure cooker environment. And he's the most successful coach. And he led the Chicago Bulls and LA Lakers. And within that, was the leader for Michael Jordan and Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant. So these absolute giants of sports icons, if you like. And the reason it resonated, interestingly, is in that highly competitive and elite world and media pressure and sponsor pressure and all of that, his sort of learnings and leadership approach were actually really quite different to what you'd expect. He cut a very different cloth to many of the other coaches, and his leadership style was very much formed by sort of humanistic psychology, Native American philosophy, Japanese leadership skills, wow. Then meditation. And the themes of it all come through sort of in this very mindful, emotionally intelligent, the team is greater than any individual sort of way. And it clearly worked because he was obviously highly successful. Yeah. I think that's a special achievement when you're dealing with, characters and egos of Michael Jordan, for example. Yeah. So it was a great read and it really resonated with me. So that's one I'd recommend.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'll share that. We'll share that with the group. I love that it's something so off-piste that you wouldn't expect as well, in terms of, like you say, someone in the sporting world that you wouldn't think would go into mindfulness or look at meditation. It would be very much go, really competitive, and that, like we were talking about earlier, the dominant sort of leadership style. So it's really interesting that he didn't take that tack.
Yeah,
So that's brilliant. So
we'll get you meditating soon, Annabel. Don't worry.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. So we just always round up the podcast with a couple of just fun questions that we ask everyone. So, What's your favourite musical collaboration?
My favourite music collaboration. I mean, there's hundreds again, so you've asked some really good questions. I guess, look, it's almost Christmas, so the one that would jump out again would be Band-Aid as the ultimate collaboration. I think if you look at what it achieved in terms of the positive impact it had, and people doing things for a problem and for people they don't even see or live near is very powerful in itself. But I guess bear in mind this has all been around collaboration. I think even the fact that I think it spun off another 3 or 4 records and 2 massive concerts in Live Aid is probably collaboration in its truest form.
Yeah, that's very true. It goes a bit beyond, doesn't it, than the normal, like Simon and Garfunkel. And the most important question of all is, what's your favourite cheese? This is life or death.
It really is, because I mean I love food, so
it's always good to hear.
And I particularly love cheese and a good cheese board. So you could have asked me who my favourite child is. It's just as hard a question. It's almost impossible. But I think it'd have to be some sort of blue cheese. I guess some sort of Cambozola or something, like a nice soft blue cheese. Nice. Great on a cheese board. Great with steak. Great in a panini.
Just all round good cheese.
Yeah, absolutely. Scores high points in any area it operates in.
I love that. Oh, well, thank you so much for your time. It's been really interesting, and thank you for your insights into Exeter City Futures, the plans for the city. Can't wait to see more developments as we go forward, and your thoughts around collaboration. It's been fantastic. Thank you, Andrew.
Oh, no, you're welcome again.
The passion really comes across, the passion that you carry with you. It's brilliant. Thank you.
Oh, no, like I said, thanks for having me on. It's been a great conversation. And like I said, for anyone who wants to come involved, come to our website, sign up, join the Net Zero Network. There's a citywide Slack, whatever you want, come and talk to us, because it's collaboration is where it's at.
Thank you. That's brilliant.
Take care. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Andrew. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening.
We really hope you enjoyed, and if you've got any insights or you'd like us to feature you in a future episode,
please do get in touch.
Oh, and don't forget the 5 stars if you liked us.
Bye.